Thank you, Sebastian. As you just said, I'll talk about Firebase today in talk number 9 of League of Geeks. I am Max, and I'm one of the 5 co-founders of ValveShelf, this cocktail machine over there. Also, I've programmed Android apps for now over 2 years, and since last year, I have been working with Firebase, so especially with ValveShelf, but also a bit before. Okay, what is Firebase all about? If you imagine an app that has some sort of online functionality, like database or user-generated content that has to be stored somewhere. Before Firebase, you always needed some sort of server you had to manage, and then also a database and a file storage server, and everything had to be maintained. What happened if sometimes hundreds or thousands of users then used your app and you weren't prepared? Well, most of the times, exactly that happens. Firebase solves all these problems because it eliminates the server in between and lets your app directly communicate with your database, your file storage, and a lot more components Firebase offers. So here's a quick little overview over all the modules Firebase provides. And it's such a huge amount that I can only focus on 5 today. But in there is also even web hosting and machine learning. So everything you could possibly need for an app is somewhere in there. Okay, the modules, the 5 modules we are going to talk about today are the Realtime Database, File Storage, Authentication, Cloud Functions, and Remote Config, since these are the 5 that are best suited for beginners and are perhaps the most interesting. Okay, how am I going to show you that today? With a nice session of live coding. So I have stripped everything concerning Firebase out of our own app. That's the screen on the left. And we'll piece by piece put it back in until we have a finished app, and you'll see just how easy that is. Now for a little demo how the empty app looks. So you see I've actually done something useful. Let's just wait a second. Beautiful. Okay, that's our app. There's not much in there. We just have a plus button where we could later add a cocktail, but it doesn't do anything yet. Okay, let's change that. And first and foremost, sorry, let's disconnect actually so we can see the PowerPoint. Thank you. First and foremost, we need a list of cocktails in there, and that's where Realtime Database comes in. What is it? It's a NoSQL database, which means that unlike traditional databases, it doesn't have any tables or fixed schemas for your objects. It just is a huge tree of data you have to manage yourself, and you can decide upon which structure it has. Also, Realtime Database syncs across all devices, all clients automatically. You don't have to do anything once it is set up. And it also happens in real time, as the name suggests. And it works offline. Once you have downloaded the data onto your client, it can be stored there locally, and the app won't crash if you don't have internet. It will just continue working. And it's all in JSON format, so if you're familiar with JavaScript, then you'll find that nice as well. Okay, let's have a look at how it actually works. First of all, this is the Firebase Console, so the web interface which you can manage all your stuff in. And I've set up a little demo database here. It consists of a list of cocktails. So we have a lot of IDs here, and under every ID is a cocktail representation with a name, description, some image, and also a list of ingredients that this cocktail has. Same with ingredients, and then we also have a users directory in which there is just the standard user right now. And the cocktails and ingredients list in the users are just the IDs and the status. So if you are a user and created a cocktail, then there would be the flag owned in there. If you are a user and edited a standard cocktail, then there would be edited in there. And if you don't own the cocktail, it's not in there at all. Okay, so that's what we are working with. But now let's just put it into our app. Okay. First, I've prepared a class FirebaseManager all you see in there is just boilerplate code, so nothing important, and that was just to keep the app running at the start. Okay, how are we going to start? We are going to first obtain an instance of our database. So Firebase database.get instance, and then we have our database object. By the way, it's all that simple to set up in your app and online that I will skip the setup because it's really easy. You'll find out if you try it. Yeah, so now we have our database. It doesn't do much, but we want to keep the downloaded data once we have it. So let's set the persistence to enabled. Then we will take the reference of it, and a reference is just like a path. You could imagine it just like a URL or a file path within your system. So the database reference is just this topmost item in here. And if you would put /cocktails behind it, then you would end up here. Okay, and that's exactly what we are going to do next. So here are all references we are going to need in this talk. It's the cocktail list with all cocktails and their actual data, same for ingredients, and then the user's own cocktails, so just the IDs of them and if he owns them or has edited them. And this user ID is just League of Geeks for now. Okay. Now we actually want to put all the data in these paths into lists. And first and foremost, we would like to have it ordered. And we can do this with Firebase queries. So we take our reference, and then we can order it, or we could actually limit it to the first 30 cocktails, and now only 30 would show up. And to keep these queries automatically happen over and over again, if something changes, we set the keep synced attribute to true. Okay, these queries still don't do much. We still don't have a nice list of cocktails, how we would like it. So let's tackle that next. Okay, that's a lot of code, but it's quite easy to grasp actually. Firebase array is just a list that listens to this cocktail query. So in this list will end up all the data in this cocktail ID list here. And of course it's in JSON, so we have to parse it somehow. And I've just put it in pairs from the ID to its value, so owned or edited or something else. Okay, that's still just the IDs, not the actual cocktails. That's what we are going to do next with Firebase index array. So that was a Firebase array that just takes the query and fetches it. This takes the same query here, but you supply it a data source. So it takes every ID it gets from this query and looks it up in our generic cocktail list where all the cocktails are in there. And then we'll code the parser in a second. It will put out cocktail classes into that list. So we can work with them very nicely in the rest of our app. Same with ingredients again. And, oh, actually, we need to enable them. Okay, these lines are just there to get at least one listener on these lists. So a list won't do much on its own until someone looks out for it, looks out for data. So we need to attach at least one listener. Okay, now we have that. But we still don't have a League of Geeks user in there. So if we would run the app, it still would be empty. So let's just copy the standard user for now to our League of Geeks user. And that's just app specific. So we look if we have synchronized it before. That flag is false at the beginning. We'll set it later. Okay, and here we just call our sync function. And all it does is fetch the IDs and ingredients, the cocktail IDs and ingredient IDs from the standard user and puts it in a second in our own user. So we have a single value event listener for that, which means Firebase will call this listener once with all the data it finds at this reference. Okay, and on data change delivers a data snapshot, which is just the representation, the actual data in JSON of this stuff here. Okay, so we can now put this into our own user. And first of all, if the standard user isn't there, we don't do anything, of course. But if it is there, then we go through the cocktails list, and for each ID in there, pardon me, we create a child in our user cocktail IDs, and remember we have set that here, so that's the path for our user, League of Geeks, and we'll set the value of that ID to inherit it. Because we copied it from the standard user, we don't want the user to be allowed to edit it. And same with ingredients. Then we will tell our app that we already have synced everything with our standard user, so we don't have to do it next time. And we don't have a callback in this class, so we can skip that. Okay. That was all we have to do in FirebaseManager. Now we have all our data downloaded into our own user, and now we just need to put it into a list. And if you're familiar with Android, but you don't have to be, there's recycler views, which is just a list on the UI. And then there's recycler view adapters, which adapt your data model, so your list of something, to this UI list so you can actually see it. And Firebase, of course, provides us with a nice and handy class for that. So we have a Firebase recycler adapter with our cocktail list in here. And remember, that's the Firebase indexed array for our user. So we have all the owned cocktails in there automatically. We don't need that anymore. That was just for the first demo. Okay, and that's almost all. Firebase only wants us to change this method header here. Okay, that's our list. Now we have everything in there, but we haven't called our FirebaseManager yet, so we have to do this from our cocktail activity, so our main screen from the app. The first screen just initializes our FirebaseManager, and that's done quite simply by this dummy method here. It itself does nothing, but implicitly it calls this init method. Okay, and we have to import our, oh, we don't have it, right. Remember I said we don't yet have cocktail classes because it's all in JSON. We have to change that very quickly. There we are. Firebase provides a class snapshot parser, so automatically Firebase already delivers us a cocktail. Only the ID is missing because it's the key, not the value in our case. So if you look here, wait a second, this is our ID, it's the key of the reference, and then the values are all in there. So the Firebase parser just puts that in there, and that's what we have to add manually. Okay, so we do this with this line here, and it works for ingredients and cocktails. Yeah. Okay. That's now actually everything we have to do. And now we can start with our first demo, actually. Yes, thank you. Okay, and I'll switch to the phone. Let's just wait until it is compiled. Takes a lot longer the first time around. Oh, great. It seems we have missed something here. I'm sorry about that. Let's look into it. Ah, okay, we still haven't imported our snapshot parser. Now we have. Now we can run it. Okay. And this time it actually works. If you wonder about it, the language I use here is not Java. It is Kotlin, which is a fairly new language that is supported with Android, and it's really great for removing boilerplate. So semantically, everything should be the same, and it's fully interoperable with Java, so check it out. Okay, and now actually our app is running. And beautiful, we have our list there with no photos yet because we haven't put them in there. But if we look at the database, we now have a League of Geeks user. It has cocktails, which are all inherited from the standard user. And the first ID here is 058 something.
We don't see that.
Oh, yeah, of course, sorry. Okay, once more. We have a user League of Geeks now. Let's make this bigger. And here, all the cocktails are inherited. And if you look, 058 is the first one, and that's vodka energy, which is exactly what we saw first in the UI list. Okay, that's actually it for the database, almost, because we can't yet add any cocktails, and we want to do that, of course. So let's jump back into the code. And let's go back to FirebaseManager for a second. Oh, we are already in there. Nice. Oh, sorry. Just 1 second. Yeah, now. Okay. I have prepared a method which is called writeCocktail. It's blank, but it takes a cocktail which comes from our edit screen I've shown you before, and it will put its data into Firebase. And we just check here if the cocktail is new and hasn't been created before. Then we actually want to assign it an ID, which is, in our case, just a combination of numbers and letters, but it's not too important. It's just what you saw in all those lists. And then we want to put the cocktail into our ref user cocktail IDs, which is our ID list, and just its ID, of course. And we set it to owned because we created it. And we also want to set the actual cocktail into the cocktail list. So again, child ID, and put the cocktail in there. And Firebase automatically takes this cocktail, converts it to JSON, and uploads it to the Firebase. Okay, that's it for creating new cocktails. If we want to edit a standard cocktail, let's say gin tonic, we want to put more gin in it, for example, then we can take the old ID, just save it away, create a new one, remove the old ID from our cocktail IDs in our user, but not from the actual cocktail list because it's a public cocktail, everyone else should still have it. And then just put the new ID with some sort of edited flag in our own user and put the cocktail with the new ID into the cocktail list. So then we have actually overridden a old cocktail, but just for us. Okay, and if you have already edited a cocktail, it's much simpler. You just have to update the cocktail in the cocktail list and not change anything in your ID list. So yeah, one more time the same thing. And we are done with creating and editing cocktails. Now we want to delete them. That's also quite simple. We just look at who the cocktail, what ownership status the cocktail has. So that variable just stores owned or edited or inherited from someone else. And if we own it or we have edited it, then we remove it from the cocktail list. If we don't own it, we just remove it from our ID list. And also if we own it, we also remove it from there. So if we own it, we remove it from both references. If we don't own it, just from our own. Okay, and we just have to call writeCocktail now in our edit cocktail activity, which is the screen with the photo and everything. And that's just this one line here. Okay, that calls our function, and the cocktail is assembled from the data we input. Let's test it. Okay, nothing has changed here. That's okay, because we only have edited this screen. So now we can just put a demo cocktail in here with some description. And I've already implemented all the lists for ingredients, so don't panic if you see photos there already. And we can just put some 2 random ingredients in there and hit save. And then somewhere in our list, a cocktail named demo will show up right there with these two ingredients. And now we can actually look into our Firebase. And we will see an owned cocktail in our League of Geeks cocktails. Oh, great. And now we can actually see an owned cocktail in our users' cocktails. Beautiful. And also JE3 is now in the generic cocktail list. Let's just search it. It's right there. And it has some description, and it is demo, and it has a list of ingredient IDs. Beautiful. So now we have everything our database needs to have. Oh, I haven't shown deletion, but I can do that later. Now we actually want to add photos. And how are we going to do that? Well, Firebase provides a solution for that, of course. It's Firebase Storage. And this allows you to store user-generated content very easily. It can grant for very easy file up and download. It's very few lines of code, and you don't have to do any error checking. And it handles errors and connection loss. So if you are offline and attempt to upload a photo, it won't throw any error, but it will wait until you are online and then just upload it when it's ready. So you don't have to do anything. And you can also restrict certain folders for certain users. And that's actually, oh, wait a second, not yet done. Yeah, let's actually show it in Firebase Console. So we just head over to the storage tab here, and we already have a standard folder. And it's a pretty normal file structure here. So here we have all the photos the standard user has, so the standard cocktails have, but not yet photos of our own users. Okay, let's change that. Here we are. And let's head back to FirebaseManager for a quick line of code. Here we are. So in the init method here, yeah, got it. We just need to place a reference to our file storage. So it's exactly the same as with database. You handle it exactly the same. You can also do child and then your user ID there. It's all the same. And now we have our instance for our storage. Now we have to put the photos into our list. Okay, so let's head over to our list, which is the cocktail adapter. And in here, we get a cocktail, and then we fill in all its text and what has to be filled in. And here we want to load our image. So let's just do that. And that's literally all the code you have to do. One quick note, Firebase uses Glide, which is a library for Android, to load all these images. So it doesn't offer a native way of doing that. So you have to download that library as well. But alone this line downloads your complete image for that cocktail. And this image from method is just taking the path of the image which is stored in the database and puts it as a child of the file reference. So you're just going down that path again until you have the URL you want to have. And then we are just placing a placeholder in there and tell it where to go in our list. Okay, and that's actually all you have to do for reading files. It's not more code, I swear. Let's demo it. And voila, all the pictures we have seen in the standard user are now in our list. Beautiful, and we can actually tap on there and see all the ingredient images as well. Okay, so far for downloading files. Now we want to upload them again, so we can actually put photos on our edited cocktails. And for that, this time I will switch back. for that, let's go back into our Firebase Manager one more time. And I've prepared a method writeImage. All of the code you see up here is just compression. So you don't have to actually do it, and it has nothing to do with Firebase. The Firebase code itself is actually quite short as well. Okay, so first of all, we are uploading a JPEG image, so we want to set the metadata for it. It's not necessary, but it certainly helps Firebase classify it. And then we want to upload our image. Let's get rid of this here. Okay, so once again, we get a child of our reference, so our folder where we want to put it, and our file name. And then we just say reference.putFiles, put bytes, sorry, and then the actual bytes of the image. Bytes because I compressed it, and bytes are what I got back, but you can as well put bitmaps or file paths or anything else Android supports in there. It eats everything, yeah. And that's actually it. Now it will upload the file at the next possible moment. And if you actually want to get notified when it is uploaded or when an error occurred, then you can just register some listeners. So success listener, failure, or progress even. And I'm just writing those to console, but you can do much more useful things with that. Okay, now we have to, oh wait, we also want to delete the images, of course, if we delete our cocktails. So in our delete cocktail method, we want to delete the images right there. Okay, so that's just reference.delete. And this is again the reference we get back from our cocktail. That's just a helper function. Okay, and we only want to delete it if we own the image. Okay, so let's go into our edit activity you have seen before, and actually put the code in there for file upload. Yeah. So here in our store image method, we have already gotten an image from our camera or gallery or from somewhere else, and it's here as bitmap, and we just need to call our writeImage function with the bitmap. It gets compressed and uploaded, and we can put some callback on there. We don't actually use that, but it's there. Okay, now for deleting the image, we can also just call our delete image function we have just written. And also, if the upload is still in progress, we can cancel it right away, and we don't even have to call this function. So that's what this code does. Okay, now for the fourth demo. So nothing has changed in this list again, but now we can add a cocktail. Yes, we want to grant access here. And let's just make a photo of my laptop, for example. Okay, it's in there. Then photo, something. And let's add some ingredient. Okay. Now, when we hit save, the cocktail will be written as normal, and the image will be uploaded in the background. So if we scroll through here, yes, here it is. That's our actual image we just uploaded. Now it's compressed and has made the round trip from our phone to Firebase and back down. If we look at Firebase now. Oh, great. Thank you. Okay, there's our League of Geeks user now, and there is one file in there, and you can click on it and see this photo. Very nice, and it's compressed. Perfect, that's all Firebase Storage does for you, and that's how simple it is to implement. So next, our users can now upload photos, and they can upload how many they want and be as malicious as they want. So we want some sort of protection. And Firebase, of course, gives us authentication, so we can easily do that. Yeah, authentication is even simpler than the two things before, and that's because it provides already finished UI, so you don't have to design any login interface or anything like that. And it also provides all the security and logic behind your authentication. It supports OAuth from all big providers, so you can log in with Google into your app, with Facebook, with Twitter, with your email, whatever you configure it to do. And with authentication, you can restrict access to certain paths in your database or files, and much more. Okay, so let's do some live demo again. Let's just have a quick look at how it looks in the actual Firebase console. I have enabled email authentication here, but you can just as easily go here and activate Google authentication, but you have to put some API keys in your app and all of that. So I kept it simple this time. Okay, let's head over to our cocktail activity, which is the only class we have to change for this. And let's make an authentication function here. So this is just comments here, we don't need them, but that's our actual function. So if our Firebase current user is null, we are not yet authenticated, and we need to do. We are doing this in just a second. And if it's not null, then we are already authenticated and can do our action, which is just a callback. I gave it in here. Okay, so first thing we have to do is provide a list of providers for authentication. And that has to match the stuff you have put into the console. So it's just email authentication for us, but you can do Google and Twitter and everything else. So if you have this list, you can actually start the login intent. That's just the screen you see with the login form. We'll see that in just a minute. And here we are getting, once again, the instance of something, in this case, authentication UI. And then we create a sign-in intent with our providers for authentication, like email. Okay, and this intent gets automatically called. And once we are done with that, this method will run. And we will say our user is new. We need synchronization with the standard user. So we get our cocktails. And then we can finally do our callback. Okay, and that callback is actually needed up here. So we do everything we did before, but now we also set our user ID to the Firebase user ID. And then we, again, create our list and our Firebase Manager. And that's everything you have to do for authentication. Let's check it out. Okay, and immediately you will see we don't get our list anymore. We get a fully fledged UI with all the email addresses I have on my mobile phone. Now I can just tap on one, and I've registered before, so I only have to log in again. But if you weren't registered, it would also do that for you. And now I can just type in League of Geeks here. Click login. Wait a second for it to sync with the standard user, and there's our list again. And so far not much has changed from a user perspective, but if you look into our database, for example, oh, I'm sorry. So if you look into our database now, we have a new user, and it's just a token, so no personal information gets uploaded right away, only if you opt in to do so. And here we again have our cocktails and ingredients. So League of Geeks user is not needed anymore right now. Can delete it. Okay, and the same automatically happens for storage and everything else. So that's authentication in a nutshell. Now let's go on to the fourth feature, which I'll glance over very quickly because it's way too complicated for this talk. But it's cloud functions. So sometimes it could happen that you don't have a server, but you still need some backend code, for example, for cleanup of your old users or something like that. And cloud functions does exactly this. It runs on the servers of Google, so you don't have to manage anything, but you can just upload your code there. And also you can interact with other Firebase modules. So for example, if the database is changed, then you can do some action on it. And that all happens without any mobile phone running. Okay, and you can also call Firebase functions from your app if you need to do so. Now let's go to live coding again. Actually, I won't live code here. I will only show you a quick snippet of code, how you would do it. Okay, so this is TypeScript. You can wait a second. I will go into presentation mode here. This is written in TypeScript. You can also write it in JavaScript. And Firebase sets up a bare minimum of configuration for you. So for example, it already defines a standard function for you. And that's just what I wrote into it. So with Firebase functions, you have many different function types. And this is a database trigger. So functions.database.somePath.onWrite. So every time something is written to that specific path, this method will be triggered automatically. And same is true for file storage or for analytics or for some HTTP request if you want that. Okay, but let's go over what I did here. I said for some description of some cocktail, if it's updated, look if it's empty, and if it's empty, then put some default text in there. So first of all, we get the change, and you have a before and after the change, so you can compare them if you need to. We just say if the database reference doesn't exist after the change, which means it is deleted, then do nothing. Otherwise, let's get our description, which conveniently lies at the reference we specified here, so we don't have to drill down further. And then let's put it out on the console, which we will see online later. And if the description is empty, then put in cocktail has no description. Else, we just return null here. Okay, and this return might confuse some of you. It's actually returning a promise, which is a feature of JavaScript, which signals the function that the application has terminated or will terminate after this asynchronous method is called. So you need to do that with Firebase functions, and it's quite complicated, but for this example, it's quite simple. Okay, and once you have coded your function, then you can actually deploy it right from the command line. So just Firebase deploy here. And this can take up to 30 seconds or even a minute sometimes. But it will compile your JavaScript for you, warn you of any errors before you upload it, and then it will actually, as it does now, upload your new function. Okay, ready. If we look into our Functions tab in Firebase now, we can see exactly the function we just created, database demo, and it triggers on the event reference.write on this path, which is hard to read. Okay, let's try it out manually in our Firebase console. So let's go into some random cocktail, like this one, and it now has the description, this is a test cocktail. Let's replace this by nothing. Let's just wait a second. And there our function ran automatically and put in cocktail has no description. And also, if you're interested, there's our log. Those always take a while to show up. So yeah, but here we have it. This cocktail has description. Cocktail has no description. It just changed that. Nice. Okay, that's a quick look into Firebase functions. Now we'll continue in our app with the last feature I'll show you today, which is remote configuration. So often you have some feature planned over a long time. For example, we have planned that more users can connect to the machine at once, but we haven't released that feature yet. But as soon as we want to release it, we want every user to have it instantly without having to update the app. So you can toggle features remotely with remote config. And not only that, but you can also base that on conditions. So if your users are in Germany, for example, then release the feature a week earlier, and then in the USA release it a week later, or something like that. You can also do A/B testing, user testing with it, and you can also make analytics with it, but that's way too deep for going into today. Okay, so for the last time in our demo, I'll show you the Firebase console first. So scroll down here all the way. There it is. And we don't have any parameters yet. And we need to add one. And I don't have the key right now, but I'll fetch it. There it is. I have decided to program an Easter egg. So we will just add this flag here. And then here we can specify a value that the clients receive as soon as we put this live. So we could say, no, we don't want to enable the Easter egg. Or we could say, if we are in Germany, let's enable the Easter egg. If you are anywhere else, don't enable it. So that's this. And you can create new conditions quite easily. So here's the screen. You give it a name, and then you can say language, region, random user, everything, and you can combine those as much as you like. Okay, but let's add this simple parameter here, and then we have to actually publish it, and from then it will be live for every client. So let's do that. Okay, not much would happen in our app now because we haven't implemented it, but it's just, I believe, 5 lines of code or so. So let's go the last time for today in FirebaseManager. Scroll all the way up here into our initialize function. And at the very end here, I want to download our remote configuration. So once again, we get the instance. And then we actually have the opportunity to set default parameters. So if we don't have internet, for example, our app can still behave predictably. So I've just said, don't enable this Easter egg. Okay, then we actually want to fetch the actual config from the server. And here you can specify a number of seconds after which this config becomes outdated and you want to download it again. So I've put this at 10 seconds, so it will show up faster here. Okay, and then you need to activate the fetched values once this call is complete. So we are doing this just here. Okay, so all the values we have put in online are now actually available in our app, but we aren't using them yet. Let's just put that in. So here we are looking into our Firebase remote config again, get the Boolean of our Easter egg if it is enabled, and then if it's enabled, we can do something. Let's test it out actually. And it might be happening that you don't see it right away because remote config always takes a few minutes up to seconds up to minutes to propagate for every device. So if we just mirror the device here, oh, it actually just synchronized. Beautiful. Okay, so instead of percentages for our alcohol level, we now have very descriptive names. And that's all enableable or can be enabled or disabled via one click online for every client in Germany in this case. Okay, that's all the features I wanted to show you today. If you want to dive into Firebase, and great. I just have to look into the audience and I see these nasty views that something is wrong. Okay, if you want to get started with Firebase, Google actually provides a beautiful documentation and very easy to follow guides. So that would be my recommendation. If you want to have all of this in video form, then you can also head over to their YouTube channel. Okay, So all of this will be on YouTube in a week or so. So then you can get to these links. And now a thing from the actual office space our startup is in. They are making an innovation challenge. So if you want to participate, then here it is. So questions? Not for this now, for Firebase actually. That's just an ad. Yeah.
I have a question regarding the authorization stuff. You showed us only the login with this authorization. Can I, or how much possibilities do I have to configure, for example, which fields I need for user to the first name, the last name, the postcode, etc. How many can I configure in the Firebase console?
For everything considering OAuth, so with Google or so, you just have to ask it to get those informations and it will be there. That's easy. But with email, you can actually do this as well. So you can create custom authentication providers. So then you can ask for email name, address, for example. But it's not really very difficult.
Do I have to implement it by my own? So implement the dialog by my own? Where
the dialog, not so much. Could actually be. Yeah, I guess you have to implement the UI for that yourself.
Okay.
But they will provide some sort of template, I'm sure. But you actually need to put it into Firebase here as well. So authentication providers.
The email address option is only the email address, no name?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
But you can, I don't find it right now, but you can provide specific other providers. Yeah.
Okay. And for the email option, is there some check that the email is valid when I enter a new email? Do I receive
not by
verification?
Not by default,
okay.
I believe, but you can definitely implement that. For this demo,
by my own.
No. I think there is actually an option you can set. I'm not totally sure, but I think that's, yeah. Yeah.
Another question, why have you chosen Firebase and not other, like AWS or so?
That's because I would still have to host all of my server-side code on there. And Firebase just provides the database, which my app directly connects to, and you don't have to do anything yourself. So mainly because the setup is easier, and actually for most use cases it's free. So if you don't have over 100 users or so per day, then it's absolutely free.
But how is the pricing regarding the storage?
We can look at it. So there is some pricing models, but the actual price is always determined by how much you're using. So you can look at the details. I don't know it because we haven't yet bumped into this limit. We can actually use this for free with our machine. Yeah?
You talked about Android, but could you also program style for Windows, for example?
Yes. Firebase is available for Android, iOS, web, and a lot of other APIs. It depends on the exact feature of Firebase, but database, for example, also has bindings for Java, for C++, and it's basically all the same code. So just a bit operating system dependent, but these references and everything and how you work with them is exactly the same. Yeah?
Regarding the Firebase functions you showed us in the Visual Studio Code.
Yeah.
Can I debug it in the Visual Studio Code? Or?
Yes, you can actually test them offline completely on your device.
Okay.
And basically you say Firebase serve down here, and then it will run on your laptop, for example. And then you would still have to go into your smartphone, for example, if you want to call a function from your app and change the URL from Firebase to your own laptop, but you can test it completely. And they have a very nice guide on testability, so if you're new to it, it's no problem at all to get into it. Yeah.
Sorry, me again.
Ask away, no problem.
Can you tell me the difference between Firebase and the Google Cloud? Because you were in the Firebase Console, but
yeah.
As far as I know, there's also a Cloud Console, and I'm not sure how there's at the beginning of the cloud and there's...
Cloud is things like, okay, functions is really pretty much the same thing as Google Cloud, but here you have the advantage to very easily interact with your Firebase database. If you had just to do some function on the internet, you could just as much use AWS or Google Cloud or something. Yeah, and they interleave it very much because it's all in the cloud and it all belongs to Google, so you will see in the Firebase documentation links to Google Cloud and vice versa.